And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dr. Bruce Goldberg, who holds advanced degrees in dentistry and counseling psychology. He has an international hypnosis practice in Los Angeles. He's an author of many books, and he's here today to talk about alien DNA and our true origins. Dr. Goldberg, welcome back. It's great to have you again.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to reincarnate. And your viewers, if they want to learn more about my work, obviously I have a website which has all my upcoming events. I do monthly podcasts. First Sunday of the month, they can get all that from my website. But today we're going to be discussing our true origins, which is extraterrestrial. And I'm going to deal with the science aspect as well as the metaphysical. So I want to show this is not just making things up or being brainwashed by some, theoretical paradigm that doesn't have any science to it. I always deal with the scientific aspect when I deal with my metaphysics. So we're going to deal with a lot of ETs that have custom designed our civilization and are around today to deal with us.
Before we go there, have you had any type of contact or seen UFOs yourself?
Not UFOs, but I have contacted time travelers from our future in the fifth dimension, and I've also met some of the ETs that are part of time traveler teams. But no, I have not seen a, quote, UFO on the Earth plane, no.
Many people think the Greys are time travelers. Do you agree with that?
Well, they're part of a time traveler team. They're lower levels, by the way. The time travel team consists of the pure human, the leader of the team. Then you've got hybrids, half human, half ET. And then you've got the Greys, which are the gophers. They're the lowest level.
All right. Well, what are the type of ETs that are out there?
All right. So we have a lot of ETs. First, in North America, the most common sightings are the Greys. If you go to England or Britain, you're going to have Nordics as your most common ETs. If you go to South America, you're going to have really bizarre creatures and these hairy monsters that tend to be most of the sightings. Really weird. Now, we're going to talk about the Lyans, the Syrians, the Pleiadians, the Nordics, the Arcturans, the blue avians, and the reptilians are the ones that are most involved with my research.
All right.
I want to talk about we're talking about the DNA. The theme of this is, of course, the DNA. Hold on a second here. The DNA being extraterrestrial in our body. So there is a scientist named Dr. Max Rempel. He is from Russia. He is a molecular biologist, and he's from the Institute of Gene Biology in Moscow. Now, what his research is, he wanted to discover or study why some people are very telepathic and have a lot of psychic abilities naturally, right? He called them heightened perception is the term he used, but that's psychic abilities. So what he found out, he studied people who were abducted. And you know what he found out? That the DNA of abductees did not come from the parents. Isn't that interesting?
What do you mean by that?
When you have DNA, you get 23 chromosomes for your parents, for your mother, 23 from your father. And those chromosomes are DNA. So you get your DNA from your parents, right? But the abductees didn't. Now, let me show you the science behind that. Simply, I'll make it simple. DNA, what they call nucleobases, you got 4 of them. You got adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, all right? Everybody knows that. Now, these nucleobases combine to form the information in the DNA molecule. So that's your DNA. Cytosine and thymine came to the Earth from asteroids, comets, and meteors. So they're extraterrestrial. So half of our nucleobases are extraterrestrial in origin. What do we learn from that? But what's interesting about Dr. Rempel's research is that the DNA did not come from the parents. Now that makes it, there's only one other source for that, extraterrestrial. Okay? And we're going to talk about how this happened. We're dealing with a couple of very significant extraterrestrial groups. One is called the Lyans. The Lyans came to the Earth about 5 million years ago. And let me describe them. They're also known as the Atlantes. They were the basis of the Atlantis civilization. We've done podcasts on that. We've done interviews on that. So the Illyrians were very tall, 6 to 9 feet tall. The giants from the Old Testament would be relevant to the Illyrians. They were dogmatic, authoritarian, materialistic, selfish, and they tried to enslave us. They had light eyes, like blue-green eyes, light skin, and they had red hair. So when you look at like Irish people or red-haired people, that's a Lyran characteristic. They were known for their interest in birds and cats. Now, one of the myths that you have from ancient times is the phoenix, the ancient bird that dies, the phoenix bird is looks like a giant eagle, and it dies, it lasts for 500 years and then dies and reincarnates at a much more powerful bird, whatever you want to call it. So that was symbolic of the Lyrians because they want to show you how indestructible they are, how they're going to always be here. They're going to reincarnate and they're going to take over the world. Okay, so that's the Lyrians. They try to enslave us. They come from the Orion constellation. Remember the 3 pyramids in Giza Plateau symbolize the Orion constellation. Think of that. Now, what's interesting about them, when they came to the Earth, they were not gatekeepers of the wormholes or the Stargate. That was the Pleiadians, which, by the way, are cousins of the Lyrians, interestingly enough. And we'll deal with them shortly. Now, the Lyrians, when they came here, they had to be incubated in like a little coffin, in a spacecraft where they would be traveling for light years, and then they would come out of the coffin, the incubation. So the primitive humans would see the ship come from the sky of these ETs that were like God to them. They worshiped them because they could do all the technology. So they looked upon the sky as heaven. And because the Lyrians had to come out of that coffin they were in to, come out and be on the earth, that was the idea of burying the dead in a coffin. It comes from the Lyrians. Isn't that interesting? Okay? Got that?
Many people in the ET world consider Lyrians to be cat-like.
Yeah, cats and birds are their symbols. Yeah,
or they look like lions or something.
Remember, they used the lions, of course, the constellation to create the Sphinx in Egypt. Remember that? They were involved with that. The Sphinx was built about 10,450 years old ago. And we'll talk about the younger Dryas to document that in a little while. I don't want to interrupt the categories here. The eyes were very important to the Lyran. The eye of Horus. Think of that. Lyran, very Lyran symbol. Now, years later, from the Lyran 5 million BC, the Syrians came in from the Syrian constellation. Syrians are very important to the Egyptians, as we'll see. The Syrians were a little smaller than them. They were about 6 feet tall, darker eyes, darker skin. Birds, dogs, and serpents were the symbols of the Syrians. And they were the good guys. So think of Noah was warned by a serpent to build the ark in the Old Testament. In Genesis, okay? Serpent, that's the Syrian symbol. The group that the Syrians became were called the Essenes. The Essenes were the spiritual leaders of Mu, Lemuria, and Atlantis. Compare that to the Atlantes, which were the Lyrians. And by the way, there was a lot of genetic interbreeding, okay? So we have no pure ETs anymore, okay? Around 3200 BC in Egypt, that was a very significant year because the Sirius star became worshipped as the most important star. Why? Beginning of the Egyptian New Year, and that was a way of worshiping Osiris, the god of the dead, came from Sirius. You see how that works? So that's where you get that. Now, the Syrians controlled what we call Upper Egypt, which is the southern part of Egypt. Remember, the Nile flows from south to north. So Cairo area today would be part of Lower Egypt, and that was controlled by the Lyans and the Atlanteans. The Murians or the Lemurians were the Syrians and the Essene. They controlled the southern part, just to keep that in mind. Now, a couple of things about this. Genetic engineering began about 500,000 BC, so there was a lot of interbreeding going on. The Lyrians were very important from a genetic perspective because the Pleiadians, which were also our saviors, they really helped us, and they were gatekeepers to the stargates. They were cousins of the Lyrians. The Greys, the Zeta Reticuli, they were also related to the Lyrians too. So the Lyrians were very important genetically in relating to the other groups, at least one of which was very important to us. And the Greys, of course, were 5 feet tall, grayish skin, 4 fingers and toes, no earlobes, but they also come not just in gray, but they also are known as the little whites and the little blues. There are whites and blue Zeta Reticuli. You don't hear much of them, but they are reported. So keep that in mind. Now, another group that I really like the most are the Arcturians. The Arcturians are the wisest of all the ET groups. They were considered to be ascended masters, and they were the most ancient, the oldest of all the ET groups. They had green skin. They were about 5 foot tall, and they had large eyes. So when you think of the Arcturians, they are considered to be ascended masters, very, very spiritual. And they were older than all the other ET groups. So they were very significant to our growth as a species when all the genetic intermixing occurred. Now, there is a confusion between the Nordics and the Pleiadians. They do look alike. The Nordics are taller. They're about 6 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, very athletic physique. They look like an Olympic athlete. The Pleiadians are much more spiritual. They're about 5 feet tall, Caucasian, blue eyes, and they don't have the athletic physique. They look like a college professor, so to speak, okay? So, but they do look alike. If you looked at them, you'd have to really study the athletic physique to differentiate them. So that's where those are 2 other groups. Remember, the Nordics are more commonly seen in Great Britain than in America. Now, the one group that's a really nasty group that's around today are the reptilians. The reptilians come from the Draco constellation. They are winged. They're winged ETs. The ones in the future, when we do the Time Traveler podcast, they don't have wings, but the ones in this century and before do. They are 6 to 8 feet tall. They have green to blue to gray to brown skin. They have 3 fingers and a thumb, and they're cold-blooded, just like a reptile today. The problem with the reptilians, being pure evil as they are, is that they're cannibalistic. So you don't see many reports about the reptilians because they tend to eat their mistakes. They're really nasty. And they are eventually involved, not as a time traveler team, the good guys, but they're criminals that go from the future and escape to the present. Now, they're the ones without wings. So that's where they are. Now, another group, which is kind of fun, is what's called the Blue Avians. Now, the Blue Avians, you don't hear much of them, but they're about 8 feet tall. They're blue in color. Their skin is blue. They're telepathic, and they do teleportation, and they were involved in building the pyramids in Egypt, and they assist us in our spiritual growth. So the Blue Avians are one of the real good guys, almost like the Arcturians, very similar, except they're not as old as the Arcturians. So those are examples of the ET groups that are around today. Now remember, we have a lot of intermixing genetically. So we have parts of our DNA from all these groups. Okay, so we're a mutt, so to speak. Now, here's the problem. If you talk to a geneticist, which I have, and they'll say, doctor, this is all garbage. We don't have a baseline. If you take a baseline of a DNA sample from a human, we don't have them from 500,000 years ago when Homo erectus was around. All we have is the current one. So we don't know what our DNA looked like or what the origin of our DNA was from Homo erectus or Homo habilis, the primitive humans that go back 2 million years. You see, so we have a corrupted baseline. That's what I'm saying. So when I say we have reptilian blood or DNA, sure, but we don't have the same DNA look like as a reptilian today. I mean, like a reptile, like a lower animal. We need to know what the reptilian ET groups were like 500,000 years ago or 1 million years ago. We don't have that sample. So that's why our samples are all corrupted. So you can't talk to a geneticist about it. They're going to focus in on the deep state garbage. I was trained with the same thing. It doesn't work because we don't have the real baseline to deal with.
There's some information out there that we were created as a slave race to mine gold for ETs.
Right, that's the Anunnaki. That's Zachariah Sitkin's work. I don't have any evidence of that in my work. I've never regressed anyone to have interaction with the Anunnaki. But I'll tell you what I do like about the Anunnaki. That comes from the Sumerian scripts that go back 4,000 years ago, or 3,000 BC. The Anunnaki are well reported by the Sumerians. And they talk about Planet 9, Nibiru. Every 3,600 years, it circumvents the Earth, Well, we found a indirect reference to a planet beyond Pluto, which has been declassified as a planet anyway. And this is a planet that we don't know whether it's Nibiru, but there is a giant planet beyond what we call Pluto that we haven't seen, but we get it from the astronomers get it from the gravity interaction with our other planets. And this could be the Nibiru. We don't know. It could be.
I'm surprised they can't just aim the James Webb telescope in that
You
direction.
got a problem with that. It would be nice. You can't do that technologically today because it's very technical. But if you try to take a picture of that, it's because of the various radiation and all the things that interact. You won't be able to get a good picture of it. We have to get it by indirect evidence.
What do you know about the mantis beings?
Well, no, that would be more of the South American things. That remember, I told you they have the bizarre creatures. The mantis beings are the ones that there is a theory about them that they actually control the planet. These are extremely bright. You don't see them. Very rarely do you see mantis. But they supposedly are like the ultimate deep state. That's one of the theories. Now, I don't have any evidence of that myself. I'm just telling you what's reported. But let's talk about a very significant astronomical, geophysical situation. I'm sure you've heard of the Younger Dryas. You know what Younger Dryas is?
Right.
Okay. So for the benefit of the audience, Younger Dryas is about 12,000 years ago. This is when a comet hit the Earth and broke up a lot of the glaciers in North America by the North Pole, all the way around there, and caused a massive flood. This is the flood that's reported by every religion, every historical, every part of the world reports floods, okay? Now, they were regional floods. It wasn't like the whole world was underwater, but the Younger Dryas created a massive flood and caused an ice age, removed or exterminated a lot of species. What's significant to us is because of that, primitive man were hunter-gatherers there. Because they couldn't do that, because most of the animals they hunted were extinct, then they discovered farming and then civilization. And remember, we look upon the year approximately 10,500 BC for the creation of the Sphinx by the Lyans. Now, remember, the blue avians, they also were involved in building the pyramids, too. So that would coincide with the Younger Dryas, with the end of the old era of hunter-gathering, beginning of farming, got that? And the beginning of civilization in Egypt. Because if you look at Egypt, I wrote a book on Egypt. Your viewers can look at my website for it. It's a great book. It deals with time travelers and ETs. But Egypt was unique as a civilization. 3,000 200 BC, if you want to use that as a rule of thumb, the beginning of the first dynasty, the Old Kingdom. Everybody else was living in caves and hunter-gathering. And Egypt, not only did they were building sphinx and pyramids, etc., but they had 30 medical specialties. They did ophthalmology, they did dentistry, they had gynecology with surgery. 3,200 BC. Nobody was doing that. Not the Sumerians, not the Chinese, nobody except the Egyptians. Why? Because they had the Lyans and the Syrians and other ET groups that gave us the technology. Look, I wrote a book on Egypt, very interesting. For 100 years, period of time, you had beautiful hieroglyphics, you had the pyramids of Giza plateau that were built, and the ETs were there. But then they left. And after that, the subsequent periods were lousy in construction. The hieroglyphics were not as pretty or not as detailed because the ones that were mentors, namely the extraterrestrials and time travelers, let's not forget them, when they left and didn't come back, now we were left to our own devices and we screwed up. We just lowered the quality. It gives more indirect evidence to extraterrestrials being around.
If you look at some of the ancient structures in South America, you can easily see how the megalithic blocks were the first construction, which was amazing. Right. And then on top of that, the Indians built, which was not as good. And then the Spanish on top of that. And actually, that's the worst technology of them all.
Right. Not only that, but when you deal with the lower ones, the ones that were oldest, you can't even put a piece of paper between the rocks. Mm-hmm. That's how intimate that thing is. I don't think we could do that today. That's how accurate they were. Unbelievable. Michi Picchu, I can't pronounce it. Michi Kaku, whatever it's called.
Machu Picchu?
It's brilliant, okay? Absolutely brilliant. Machu Picchu, okay. But let's talk one little thing I want to talk about too. So people always ask me about how do I prevent an ET abduction? These would be mostly the Greys in America and North America. Okay, so if you're being approached by a Grey or a team, usually it's going to be more than one, and they're going to abduct you. Remember, there have been over 8 million abductions in America since the 1940s. Okay, so this is not rare. All right, a couple of things you can do. One, you can use herbs. St. John's wort, pennyroyal, are two worts that they don't like at all. They will leave you alone. You can use salt, magnets. They hate magnets, and they really hate iron. So some people would have an iron like a crucifix or some religious figure or some piece of jewelry that's made out of iron. That will pretty much like a cross to a vampire. They'll keep them away. But let's say they still come at you. All you have to do is do what I call the New York attitude. You confront them and say, get the hell away from me, you little piece of garbage. I'm not interested. You're not going to abduct me. Bye-bye. Remember, they only weigh like 70 pounds. They're very thin. They have no reproductive organs, no earlobes. They're not going to confront you physically. They will try to do telepathy. They'll try to do the stare. But you can confront that. You can actually reject that. So it's not difficult to protect yourself from an abduction.
What do you think about those people who do CE5 events and are trying to communicate with ETs?
Yeah.
Is that a bad idea?
You have a life here. Okay. Let me give you the evidence, and you can make your own decision whether it's a bad idea. Now, there are good ETs, but the ones that do the abductions are mostly the Greys, especially in North America. These are people that are going to treat you like we would treat a animal in a research lab. They have no emotions. They're going to be very brutal to you. You want to encourage that? Really? No. You don't want to do Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. No. You have to be out of your mind to volunteer for that. Really. Now, I did want to comment a little bit about the Lyans and the Syrians when they were involved in ancient Egypt, especially, but they were throughout the world. So the Atlantis and Mu, and I don't want to make this just about them, but we've done podcasts on that before. They were very much involved with our civilization. So the Lyans were the Atlantes from Atlantis, a very ruthless, militaristic civilization. And then you had the Syrians, which were the Essenes, the Movians or Lemurians. Now, they also built what they called temples of learning, which of course were all destroyed during the flood, during the younger Dryas and the sinking of Atlantis and Lemurius. They went down 3 times, 50,000 BC, 26,000 BC, and about 11,000 BC is when they went down. That's when you get the expression going down for the 3rd time when somebody's drowning. That's where it comes from. But this is the origin of our civilization. And also, let's not forget, it's the origin of our DNA. Our genetics all come from these groups. The Syrians and Lyans were very big. The Greys were involved too. Reptilians, not really, because they pretty much killed people and ate them. I don't remember people interbreeding with reptilians, but they did interbreed with the others. So our DNA is a big mush. We have no idea what the true baseline of the DNA was, going back to Homo erectus and Homo habilis and Australopithec africans, going all the way back in our history of our primitive man.
Why do you think the ETs got involved with all this interbreeding?
Why are we sending astronauts to the moon? And why do we want to go to Mars? We want to expand. Now, also, their civilization, their planets, could also be in trouble. Like, remember with the Anunnaki, they needed gold to put gold dust in their atmosphere because their atmosphere was dissolving and they couldn't live there anymore. So they needed to get our species to be slaves to mine gold so they could correct their atmosphere. You understand? So there are other planets that are also going into the toilet, and they want to come here to see about taking over our planet. Or we could just be an experiment to them, like Star Trek. There's a lot of reasons why they would do it. But we do it. We send out spacecrafts to Pluto. We're doing our thing. We haven't managed another planet yet, but that is a goal of NASA. Terraforming is a big issue. Oh, yeah.
Some of the Hindu gods are depicted as being blue. Do you think those are also ETs?
Yes, I think that comes from the blue aliens. I don't think it's a coincidence. Why would they pick blue? Blue was the color that was not really that known in ancient times. There is a theory they thought the Greeks could not see the color blue.
Wow.
Because they never used it. They used red and yellow and black and whatever. But blue is a very rare color for ancient depictions. Think about it.
Is it possible that it's just so simple that they couldn't find something to source the blue color from?
Oh, no, they could. The dyes, they have dyes for it. Later on, there was no problem. The problem that was the biggest problem was the color purple. Purple came from a snail. That's where they got the original chemicals to make purple. Purple dye was always used for the pharaohs, the kings, the emperors. Here's a quick story. If you look at the curtains in these castles, always purple. Now, there was a guy from Morocco, trying to think, it was Morocco in the Roman Empire when Nero was emperor around, 40, 50 BC, 50 AD. So he went to visit Nero because Rome had a relationship with Morocco. They controlled it like it's a satellite. So the king decided to make a trip wearing his garb. He wore a purple smock. You know what Nero did? He killed him. He said, "Are you trying to take over Rome? Because purple is the color of the emperor." So he killed him. He said, "Yeah, you don't wear purple in my presence." That's how significant it was.
Wow. And
purple was a very hard dye to get. They got it from snails originally, and then eventually they were able to manufacture it. But if you talk about the rarest color in ancient times, it's purple. But purple was all around, but not blue. Interesting.
Are you following any of that research of the underground imaging of the pyramids and how it goes down For miles, perhaps?
The problem is 2 words: Zawi Hawass. The evil person you can't do anything without bribing this guy. And he says, "Oh no, the Egyptian civilization is just as the 2450 BC." He won't deal with anything metaphysical. But that's why you're not going to get any science on what's going on beneath the pyramid, or the pyramid mostly.
I thought I thought that there was even new information that there's a second Sphinx underground.
They're trying to do some, satellite imagery on this and trying to get right. But you want to get in there and dig it out. You want to actually be there, not just having imagery. Yeah. Imagery is fine, but you want to get in there and go in there and investigate. And remember, even Edgar Cayce said below the right paw is like the history of humankind from 100,000 years ago, all this kind of stuff. We can't get to it. But the imagery shows that there is a space below the Sphinx and the pyramids. Oh, yeah. And water has come up too, so they have other evidence of that too. But they won't let, Zawi Hawass won't let us do it.
What do you think the purpose was of the pyramid?
Well, it was advanced technology. They may have stored records there. They may have kept it as some sort of remember, there were nuclear wars in ancient times. Okay, we can do a future webinar or interview on that. That would be fun. So maybe it was an air raid shelter mentality. That would make sense. You had nuclear wars in ancient time. We have evidence in India, in Saudi Arabia. We had the glass. We have the sand that turned into glass in certain areas. That's what happens with a nuclear explosion. What's it called? I can't pronounce it. Moheno.
Yeah, and
it's the northwest. Northwestern India, I guess, is by Pakistan, and they have radiation recording there. They had the stone was so heated so much that it was the equivalent of a nuclear reaction. They have glass in the desert there. That's the nuclear response. So where does that come from? And the Mahabharata has a section where they report a nuclear war. There's an actual section up there. It's a short section. I can do it later on. We do a future show on that or interview on that. But those are all nuclear response and nuclear reactions. There's no argument about that. The question is, can you have a natural nuclear explosion? The answer is no. You got to have pure water. You got to have a lot of things going on there with the uranium and whatever. You can't just do it naturally, man-made. Some man has to do that. So again, I would say it's probably an air raid, the combination of an air raid shelter as well as a place to store records where other people wouldn't be able to get to it, would be my assumption of that.
Do you think that there are ETs walking among us that we don't recognize?
Yeah, I think they're shapeshifters. Well, the reptilians are known as being shapeshifters, but yeah, I think there are, or at least their hybrids are. It could be we're hybrids too, technically. But yeah, there are ETs around. Oh yeah, I have no doubt whatsoever. None.
Are you up to date on the current events with this disclosure that's going on with the current administration?
About what now?
About the
ETs, about
the ETs, about how they're supposed to release all this information?
Yeah, the problem is that of course I do follow it a little bit. They haven't released everything. They say they're going to release it. It's sort of like the Epstein files in a way, They release it when they're good and ready. What about the Kennedy assassination? Both of them. And Martin Luther King. We don't have all the documents there either, okay? So Trump wants to release it. I think the deep state is holding him back. The deep state has always held him back. He wanted to release this in his first administration, and they wouldn't do it. They've ignored presidential orders. You do the math on that. I call that espionage. That's me. But so it's not that he doesn't want to do it. He's got to get cooperation from the people that hold the records. And that's the deep state.
Is there any advantage for us to get from knowing that our DNA is part ET?
Well, the advantage is to remove the fear about us being invaded by an ET like a bad sci-fi movie and to utilize this information and our intelligence and our ability to move on and become more spiritual and to eliminate fear. Remember, the one thing that keeps you in the karmic cycle, the one thing that causes misery is fear. If you eliminate fear, you grow spiritually. That's the bottom line to my work, is get rid of fear. Everything is based on fear. The universe only has two emotions: fear, which causes all the problems, and unconditional love, which leads to ascension.
Over the years of your hypnosis practice, do they reveal to you their ET encounters?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I document that in my Time Travels from Our Future book and my Egypt book.
Can you share with us some of the most fascinating stories?
Well, here's an example. One of them was a woman was regressed to a previous life in, this would be, let's see, was it Atlantis? Yeah, this was Atlantis. And she was abducted by ETs. These were Greys. And they took her aboard a craft. And they were talking about, they used the expression, I'm trying to think of what it was. They were using the expression to show that Atlantis had broken up about 1,000 years prior to that. That would have probably been 26,000 BC, because this was before the 11,000 BC breakup. They said it was like a problem in the ocean or something, and that was a reference to the breakup of Atlantis, the second breakup, the second of three. But these were ETs that did that. And she was abducted, and they were telepathically communicating with her. Remember, in the fifth dimension, all communication is telepathic. So when I deal with my time travelers, or when they abduct people, they're much more kinder to them than the current Greys. All communication is telepathic. And when I've been to the fifth dimension, and I train people, for your viewers, if they want to go to the fifth dimension and meet an ET, a good one, Pleiadian, Arcturian, or Syrian, not the reptilian or the Greys, or meet a time traveler, they can meet them in the fifth dimension. I can work with them I do Zoom sessions to train people to do that, and my books and CDs train people to do that. But I've done that myself. Well, I just want to summarize it by doing this. One, we have been interacting with ETs as well as time travelers. Our DNA is partially, if not significantly, extraterrestrial. Nothing to fear. If they wanted to take over us, they would have done that hundreds of thousands of years ago. We do have protectors, namely the Pleiadians, the Syrians, the time travelers from our future. So we're not going to be enslaved by anyone. So there's nothing to fear. So the question is, use that as a basis, acknowledge it, but say, okay, that's great. Now you don't scare me. Now we can go on and be more spiritual and be more technological and be more independent and empowered. I call the psychic empowerment. So again, there's nothing to fear from them. Forget about all the stupid sci-fi movies. They're all meant to scare you, because fear generates codependency. And that's what corporations, governments, and religions love. They love you to be codependent and to be fearful. That's how they control you. My attitude is, hey, I don't deal with you guys. I live in society, but I don't care about governments, corporations, or religion. That means nothing to me. I'm empowered. I do believe in God. I believe in the true monad, but not their God. My God doesn't smite people down and tell me what to eat. Little things like that.
Do you think we're ever going to be at a level where we will be, I don't know if we could be equal to ETs, but at least we will be interacting with them?
Well, the evidence is clear. In 1,000 years from now, we're going to have time travel. And the head of a time travel team is a pure 100% human. Not a gray, not a hybrid. We are, as a human, pure human, the head of a time travel team. The ETs are below us. So yeah, we're superior to them in 1,000 years. Not now.
Not now, unfortunately.
Well, they're not doing anything to us other than trying to interact with us, trying to manipulate people, getting sperm and egg samples, all right, whatever. But they're not enslaving us, okay? No. So nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, as FDR said. The only thing about it you ever said that I like.
What's your website so people can check out more about
All
what
right,
you're up
it's
to?
DR, D as in David, R as in Robert, and then you spell my name, BRUCEGOLDBERG.com. Now, on my website, on the homepage, I have graphics showing my webinars. I do the first Sunday of the month between 12 and 2 Pacific time. All my 21 books are on there. There are exercises on there. They can learn how to go into the fifth dimension, psychic self-defense. Psychic self-defense is what we'll be doing in November as our interview. My CDs there, DVDs if they want to see lectures. Some of my interviews are on there. I've got a YouTube channel they can click on from my homepage with 55 videos showing regressions, progressions, ET connections, abductees, time travel abductees. Some of my lectures from India and other places are on there. So there's a lot of, and they can use that to book Zoom sessions too. So there's a lot of material on there. And I've got about 35 articles that I've placed on there too. So there's a lot of, you could spend a weekend going through my website.
Is there a contact form there in case they want to ask you questions?
Yeah, they can do that. I've got links for that. They can send me questions on there. And again, we can do a Zoom link for, I do consults by, by Zoom, or by phone too, but usually people like to do the Zoom. So yeah, Zoom is everything today.
Well, Dr. Bruce, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
All right. So I told you there's only two emotions in the universe: fear, which causes all the problems, and unconditional love. Obviously, getting a dog would help you with unconditional love. I recommend miniature thousands myself. But you want some advice? Very simple. Access your higher self, your superconscious mind level, as we call it. Do it before going to sleep at night. If you do meditation or yoga or hypnosis during the day, that's fine. You can use CDs or whatever you, MP3 files, whatever. But access your higher self, connect with it, and ask a very simple or make a very simple instruction. You want to improve spiritually, raise your frequency, vibrational rate. Do that on a nightly basis, and you will win. Now, if you've got a specific goal, you can do that too, but you want to get the connection first. And that will, your higher self will connect you with spirit guides. That will also help you. But the main connection is between you and your higher self.
Dr. Bruce, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest again.
My pleasure, and I'm looking forward to reincarnating.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.